Martha had always believed that peace was a gift from God. Her life was not perfect, but it was peaceful. She lived with her husband, Emeka, and their little boy, Ibuka, in a modest three-bedroom house in the heart of Umuahia. The house wasn't painted in fancy colors or surrounded by high fences, but it was clean, warm, and filled with love. Welcome to Afro Tales TV, your home for rich, exciting, and inspiring stories from around the world. Today's story will touch your heart and keep you hooked till the very end. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our amazing stories. Every morning, Martha would wake up early to make breakfast while Emeka got ready for work. He was a spare parts dealer in the main market, well respected and known for his honesty. Ibuka, their only child, was 5 years old. He had a smile that could melt anyone's heart, and he always asked questions like, "Why do birds sing so early?" Or, "Can God hear me if I whisper?" Martha would always smile and say, "God hears everything, my son, even the quietest heartbeats." That morning started like every other. The rooster crowed before sunrise. The smell of yam and egg sauce filled the air. Ibuka was brushing his teeth outside when Emeka lifted him playfully and placed him on his shoulders. Ah, Papa," Ibuka laughed. "Today you're taller than the mango tree," Emeka said, spinning around. Martha watched them from the kitchen window, smiling. This was her joy, her family, her heart. But no one knew that day would be their last as a full family. By afternoon, Emeka began to feel strange. He had complained of a small headache while at the market, but by the time he got home, his hands were shaking. Martha rushed to him. "You're burning up, Emeka. Let me get cold water." Emeka waved her off. "It's nothing, just market stress," he said weakly. But his body told a different story. By nightfall, his fever had worsened. He was sweating and mumbling in his sleep. Martha didn't sleep that night. She wiped his forehead again and again. She placed onions under his feet. She boiled bitter leaf water. Nothing worked. The next morning, she rushed him to a nearby private clinic. They ran tests. The nurses looked confused. The doctor frowned deeply. "Madam, this is beyond malaria or typhoid," he said. "His organs are failing fast. We need to transfer him to the teaching hospital immediately." Martha's heart dropped. She clutched Emeka's hand as they rushed him into an ambulance. At the teaching hospital, they tried everything: drips, injections, oxygen. For 2 days, Emeka fought for his life. And on the third day, just before dawn, he gave up. Martha was sitting beside him, holding his cold hand, whispering a psalm. She felt his grip loosen. "Emeka," she whispered. There was no answer. "Emeka?" she repeated, shaking him gently. Still nothing. Then the machine beeped long and flat. The nurse rushed in. The doctor followed, but it was already too late. Emeka was gone. Martha didn't scream. She couldn't. Her voice disappeared. She simply bent over her husband's chest and began to weep silently. Her tears soaked into the hospital bedsheet as the morning sun began to rise. The news spread like wildfire. "Emeka is dead?" villagers exclaimed. "But he was just at the market 2 days ago." The compound was filled with people. Some came to mourn, some came out of curiosity, and some came with suspicion. Chief Damien, Emeka's elder brother, arrived in his long white agbada with his walking stick. He didn't cry. He didn't hug Martha. He didn't even look at Ibuka, who was sitting quietly in a corner with swollen eyes. Auntie Rose, their cousin, came with her loud voice and heavy perfume. "So this is how life ends?" she shouted. "A strong man brought down in his prime. Eewoo!" Martha, dressed in a plain black wrapper, sat under a tree, surrounded by women. Her face was pale. Her body trembled. She had cried for 3 days non-stop. Yet, even in her pain, she noticed that Damien's eyes carried no grief, only calculation. During the wake, Chief Damien gathered some of the elders. Martha overheard them whispering. She couldn't hear everything, but she caught a few phrases. "Too sudden. It doesn't add up. Only her was there. no witness. She closed her eyes and prayed, "God, please protect my son. I don't understand what's happening." The funeral came quickly, too quickly. Martha had begged for a little more time to prepare, but Damien refused. "We can't leave a body in the mortuary when people are asking questions," he said sharply. "Let's bury him fast." The burial day was cloudy. As the casket was lowered into the ground, Ibuka held onto his mother's wrapper tightly. "Where is Papa going?" he asked. Martha couldn't answer. She just hugged him, tears streaming down her cheeks. The pastor prayed. People dropped handfuls of sand on the coffin, and just as the final song was about to be sung, Chief Damien stepped forward. He raised his hand. "Wait," he said loudly. The crowd fell silent. "I know many of you came here today to show respect, but I must speak my mind." Martha looked up, confused. Damien continued, "My brother, Emeka, was not just a man. He was a gem, a pillar, a responsible father and businessman, but he died mysteriously. And as head of this family, I must say what others are afraid to say." The crowd murmured. He turned sharply and pointed at Martha. "She is responsible." A gasp went through the people. "Martha is the one who saw him last. She fed him. She slept beside him. And now he is no more." Martha stood up, trembling. "Chief Damien, please, what are you saying?" Damien's eyes narrowed. "You think we don't know? You wanted to inherit everything, the shop, the land, the money, but God exposed you before you could enjoy it." Tears filled Martha's eyes. "That's not true. I loved my husband." Auntie Rose joined in. "Ha! Loved him so much you killed him with stew and fake affection." She clapped her hands dramatically. "Witch!" "I am not a witch," Martha said weakly. "Please don't do this here, not on his burial day." But Damien was not done. He raised his voice. "A barren tree like you has no right to bear fruit in this house." Silence. Everyone froze. Martha felt the words slap her like cold water. Her knees buckled. Ibuka cried out, "Mama!" She fell to the ground, and that was how everything changed. The morning after the burial was quiet. Too quiet. The compound that had once been filled with laughter and the sweet smell of Martha's cooking now carried the weight of silence and suspicion. The family members who had cried crocodile tears during Emeka's burial had now turned cold and cruel. Martha sat in the corner of the veranda, holding Ibuka tightly on her lap. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her voice was hoarse from explaining herself over and over again. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Emeka's face, pale, cold, and still. 2 days had passed since they laid him in the ground. 2 days since Chief Damien had publicly accused her of murder, and now the moment she feared had come. Chief Damien walked into the compound that morning with a group of men. Some were his cousins, others were just jobless village boys looking for trouble. Martha stood up when she saw them. "Good morning, sir," she greeted carefully. Damien didn't reply. He looked around the compound with a proud expression and then pointed at her. "You, pack your things. You're leaving this house today." Martha blinked in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you have no place here," he said, his voice firm and loud. "You are no longer part of this family." "I don't understand," she whispered. "You don't need to understand," he replied. "You are a widow now, and not just any widow, a suspected murderer." The boys behind him started to snicker. "Please, Chief Damien," Martha said, holding Ibuka tightly. "I have nowhere to go. This is my husband's house, my son's home." Damien laughed. "Your husband is dead. You are no longer welcome here. This house, the land, and even the shop at the market belongs to the family, and I, as the eldest brother, am taking charge. But Emeka built this house with his sweat. I helped him. We struggled together," she said, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "Your struggle is over," he snapped. "Take your bastard and leave." Ibuka clutched her tighter. "Mama, I'm scared," he whispered. Martha's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She turned to Auntie Rose, who was standing in the corner, chewing ground nut and watching with folded arms. "Rose, please talk to him. You know I didn't kill Emika." Auntie Rose rolled her eyes. "Me? Talk to who? I warned Emika not to marry you, but he was stubborn. Look where he ended up, dead at a young age. You know I loved him." A beg," Rose shouted. "Spare us your fake tears. Pack your things and go." Martha dropped to her knees. "Just let me stay one more night. Let me find somewhere to go tomorrow. Please, for the sake of the child." Damien spat on the ground. "You want to use the night to call your witch friends, Abi? You want to finish the rest of us? Never. In fact," he turned to the boys behind him and shouted, "Clear her out." Before Martha could react, the boys stormed into the house. They began throwing her things outside: her wrapper, her cooking pots, Emika's framed photos, her Bible. They broke her plastic chair and tore her clothes. They didn't stop there. They went into the room she shared with Emika, poured kerosene on her mattress, and set it on fire. Flames shot up into the sky. "No, please!" Martha screamed. Ibuka cried loudly, terrified. "Let that fire cleanse this house," Rose said, laughing. "Maybe now the evil spirit will go with her." Martha watched as years of memories burned before her eyes. She held Ibuka close, shielding him from the flying ash. "Why are they doing this, Mama?" he cried. Martha couldn't answer. She was too weak, too shocked. Damien stood with his hands behind his back, watching the fire with satisfaction. "From today, this house is mine," he declared, "and the shop at the market, too." "But Emika left that shop to me in his will," Martha whispered. "What will? Which will? Who saw it? Did the ground open and speak to you?" he mocked. "You are lucky we're letting you leave with your life." Martha felt dizzy. She had lost her husband. Now she had lost her home. And soon, maybe her mind. She bent down and gathered a few things: her wrapper, a torn bag with Ibuka's clothes, and Emika's photo that one of the boys had thrown outside. She wiped the glass and kissed it. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the photo. "I couldn't protect our home." As she stood up to leave, Auntie Rose shouted after her, "You'll end up begging in the streets." The boys laughed. Chief Damien didn't look back. Martha held Ibuka's hand and walked out of the compound barefoot. It had started to drizzle. Each drop of rain felt like a slap on her skin. As she walked through the village road, people watched her quietly. Some looked away in shame. Others whispered behind her back, "There she goes, the woman who killed her husband. She must be dangerous. She should have died with him." Martha kept walking. She didn't stop. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just walked. Through the rain, through the mud, through the silence. She walked until the village disappeared behind her. And when she got to the main road, she looked at her son and said, "We're going to Abba." Ibuka blinked. "Where is that, Mama?" "Somewhere far from here," she said. He nodded. "Will Papa be there?" Martha bit her lip and looked away. "No, my son," she said softly. "But we will survive, just you and me." She flagged down a passing lorry going towards the next town. The driver looked at her with pity and asked where she was headed. "Abba?" she replied. He hesitated. "You have money?" She opened her palm and showed him all she had, 200 naira. The man sighed and looked at Ibuka. Then he opened the door. "Enter. Sit at the back." Martha thanked him over and over. She climbed in and sat beside wooden crates. Ibuka laid his head on her lap. She wrapped him with her wrapper and whispered, "Sleep, my love. When you wake up, we will be in a new place." As the lorry moved, Martha stared at the night sky. She had no house, no money, no family, but she had one thing left: hope. And that would be enough, for now. When Martha arrived in Abba with her son, there was no welcome, no plan, and no helping hand. The lorry that brought them dropped them off near a noisy motor park. The area was filled with the smell of roasted corn, dust, shouting drivers, and tired passengers. Martha stepped off with tired feet and trembling legs. Her wrapper was soaked, her headscarf hanging loosely, and her face was pale with exhaustion. Ibuka clung tightly to her side, holding the small nylon bag that carried the last items they owned. His eyes wandered from the strange faces to the towering buses, but he stayed quiet, unsure of what to expect in the new place his mother called our new home. Martha's first task was to find shelter. She walked with her son for hours, stopping at street corners and asking shopkeepers about cheap rooms. Finally, in a narrow, crowded part of the city filled with small, zinc-roofed houses, she found an old woman who rented her a room no larger than a kiosk. It had no fan, no mattress, and no window glass, just wooden shutters and a leaking roof. But it was something. Martha gave the woman the last of her money and promised to look for work the next morning. That night, they slept on the floor. Martha placed her wrapper under Ibuka's head as a pillow. She lay beside him, staring at the cracked ceiling. The sounds of people shouting, babies crying, and generators humming outside kept her awake. Still, she whispered silent prayers in her heart. She thanked God for shelter and asked him for strength to face the new day. The next morning, Martha rose before the sun. She walked the streets of Abba with her scarf tied tightly and a determined heart. She visited street shops, offices, and roadside stalls, asking for any kind of work. Many turned her away. Some ignored her completely, but one woman, who owned a small buka near a motor garage, offered her a chance to sweep the floors and wash plates every morning. It paid little, but Martha accepted it with gratitude. From then on, her routine began. Each morning before dawn, she swept the buka and washed the plates. Afterward, she returned home, wrapped a bundle of firewood, and walked from street to street, selling it to market women and food vendors. Some days she came home with aching feet and less than 200 naira. Other days she returned empty-handed, but she never gave up. Every kobo she made was saved carefully. She used some to buy gari, some to buy palm oil, and the rest to find a school for her son. When she finally located a public primary school that accepted students with little or no fees, she thanked the heavens. She washed Ibuka's only shirt, patched his trousers, and cleaned an old rubber school sandal that was several sizes too big. She sent him to school with nothing but hope and a small jotter torn from an old book. Ibuka began his schooling barefoot. His uniform was faded, and his school bag was a torn plastic bag. Many children laughed at him. Some called him names. A few pushed him around during break, but he never fought back. Instead, he kept to himself, sat quietly in class, and listened carefully to everything the teacher said. In his silence, a spark was growing. His eyes followed the chalkboard like a magnet. He copied notes quickly, answered questions correctly, and finished his classwork before most students even understood the instructions. His handwriting was neat. His spellings were accurate. His mind was sharp, and he remembered everything he read. The first time his teacher noticed was during a mathematics lesson. While other pupils scratched their heads and mumbled wrong answers, Ibuka solved the problems in seconds. The teacher, a middle-aged man with calm eyes and a kind smile, was surprised. He began to observe Ibuka more closely and soon realized the boy was not ordinary. Though Ibuka came to school in worn clothes and without snacks or water, his mind was richer than most of his classmates. The teacher, whose name was Mr. Ibe, started asking Ibuka to stay after school. He gave him extra books and old past questions. He allowed him to sit with older students and participate in tougher subjects. Ibuka rose quickly, like a well-watered plant. Within weeks, he was outperforming everyone in the class. At home, Martha continued her firewood business. She carried bundles on her head under the hot sun, walking miles to reach her few loyal customers. On days when she earned a little more than usual, she bought a kara and small bottles of zobo for Ibuka. They would sit under a tree outside their room and eat together, smiling even in their struggle. Some evenings they went to bed without food, but they never went to bed without prayer. As days turned to weeks, Martha cleaned more homes and took up laundry jobs. She became known in the area for being humble, quiet, and hard-working. Some neighbors pitied her, others looked down on her, but she never replied. She focused on her child and on staying alive. Meanwhile, far away in Umuahia, Chief Damien was busy rewriting the past. He had taken full control of Emeka's spare parts business. He changed the signboard, removed every memory of his late brother, and told the community that Emeka left no wife or child. He told lies in church, saying Martha had stolen family money and disappeared into the night. Many believed him. He wore fine agbadas, donated money to village meetings, and walked like a king. But deep down, he feared something, that Martha's son might return one day. Back in Aba, Ibuka's light continued to shine. He was now known across the school compound as the little professor. He answered questions in English, corrected his classmates gently, and even helped the teachers write neatly on the board. Mr. Ibe, who had now taken a deep interest in him, bought him a second-hand dictionary and a notebook with 60 leaves. He also paid part of his exam fees. Ebuka's favorite subject was spelling. He read words like they were poems and memorized them like songs. So when the school announced a local spelling bee competition for all pupils in the district, Mr. Ibe submitted Ebuka's name without hesitation. Martha was surprised when she heard about it. She didn't know what a spelling bee was, but she thanked the teacher and prayed with all her heart. The day of the competition arrived. The event took place at a nearby school hall. Pupils from 10 schools gathered, all dressed in fine uniforms, polished shoes, and new backpacks. Ibuka arrived wearing his cleanest shirt and the same oversized rubber sandals. He stood quietly among them, holding his tiny exercise book. When the competition began, many pupils stumbled on words like umbrella and rhythm. Some cried and walked off the stage, but Ibuka stood tall, calm, and confident. Word after word, he got it right. He spelled responsibility, appreciation, opportunity, development, and determination without missing a beat. By the final round, he was the last one standing. When the judge said the final word, and Ibuka spelled it correctly, the hall exploded with applause. Teachers clapped. Spectators cheered. The headmaster came forward with a wide smile and placed a plastic gold medal around Ibuka's neck. His photo was taken. His name was written on a certificate. For the first time in his young life, Ibuka was publicly celebrated. He didn't say much. He simply smiled, held the certificate tightly, and looked up at the sky as if searching for his father. That evening, when he returned home, Martha was waiting outside their room. She saw the medal hanging on his chest and the certificate in his hand. She dropped the firewood she had been tying, ran to him, and hugged him tightly. It was the first real joy she had felt in months. That night, under the dim light of a borrowed kerosene lamp, they placed the medal beside Emeka's photo and shared a meal of soaked gari and groundnuts. Their life was still hard. Their home was still poor. But something had changed. A small seed of greatness had been planted, and now it had begun to grow. The days in Aba grew longer, and the weight of life pressed harder on Martha's shoulders. The firewood business barely brought in enough to buy food, yet she worked every day without complaint. Her feet grew rough from walking miles with heavy bundles, and her hands hardened from scrubbing floors and lifting pots of water. The sun burned her skin during the day, and the cold bit her bones at night. But she never stopped moving. Every morning she left the room with aching legs and tired eyes. She returned late, soaked in sweat, her wrapper loose from the day's struggle. Neighbors saw her and whispered, some out of pity, others out of mockery. Still, she greeted everyone with a smile, even when her body begged her to sit. Martha prayed often, before leaving the house, before eating, before sleeping, even in the middle of walking. Prayer was her secret strength. She believed it was the only thing keeping her alive. But slowly, her body began to fail her. Her chest grew heavy, and her breathing shallow. The coughing came first, then dizziness, then the weight loss. Her skirts no longer fit, and her cheeks hollowed. Yet she continued her work, refusing to rest. On many nights, she sat by the edge of her sleeping mat, watching Ibuka as he studied under a small, flickering candle. She couldn't afford electricity, so she kept used candles in a tin box and brought them out only for his studies. Sometimes she watched him read with a heavy heart, wondering if she would live long enough to see his dreams come true. Ebuka had changed too. Now 11 years old, he had grown taller and more mature. He rarely complained, and he noticed everything. He started waking up early to fetch water before school. On weekends, he helped his mother sell firewood at the market. He even walked to other houses, offering to sweep compounds and run errands for small coins. Everything he earned went into a plastic container they called their school jar. In school, his brilliance became impossible to ignore. He answered questions with clarity, completed work before the bell rang, and helped his classmates understand difficult topics. Mr. Ibe, his favorite teacher, continued to guide him, giving him more advanced textbooks and practice questions. Soon, Ebuka began tutoring younger pupils in the school for free. Children who once mocked his barefoot days now followed him around with respect and admiration. Word of his brilliance spread beyond his classroom. Teachers from other schools began hearing about the boy genius in Abba. Some came to observe his lessons, others sent their pupils to him for help. And still, he remained humble. At home, Martha's condition worsened. She tried to hide her sickness, but her coughing grew louder, her movements slower. She sometimes collapsed on the bed, too weak to rise. On those days, Ebuka stayed home to cook simple meals, clean the room, and comfort her. He would boil hot water for her to bathe and crush bitter herbs he found at the edge of the bush. Martha always tried to smile, but her eyes told a different story. Despite the pain, she refused to stop praying. She knelt every night, even if her knees trembled. She spoke in whispers, asking God to strengthen her just enough to keep working, to keep surviving, to see Ebuka grow. One Sunday evening, everything changed. A youth fellowship program was held at a small local church. Ebuka was invited to speak after someone heard him reciting Bible verses at the market. He had never stood in front of a crowd before, but he agreed to share a message. Dressed in his best shirt and worn trousers, he walked to the front of the church that evening with calm confidence. The church was filled with people from the neighborhood. Women in colorful headscarves, young boys with plastic sandals, old men with walking sticks. Ebuka stood at the altar and began to speak. His voice was clear and gentle, yet strong. He talked about faith, hard work, kindness, and the importance of never giving up. He quoted scriptures from memory and used simple examples that touched everyone listening. Unknown to him, sitting quietly at the back of the church was a visiting pastor from another part of the city. The man had come to see his friend, but stayed when he heard the boy's voice. By the end of the speech, the pastor was moved to tears. He waited until the service ended and quietly asked to meet the boy. When he learned about Ebuka's background, he made a promise in his heart to do something. Within a week, the pastor returned with documents offering Ebuka a full scholarship to a top private secondary school in the city. The school was known for producing some of the best students in the country. It had science labs, computer rooms, a library filled with thousands of books, and teachers trained to guide gifted children. When Martha received the news, she broke down and cried. Not tears of sorrow, but of gratitude. Her body was failing, her strength was almost gone. But now she saw light. She had carried firewood for years with nothing but sweat and prayers. And now, her son's path was opening. Meanwhile, back in Umuahia, a different story was unfolding. Chief Damien, once praised as a respected businessman, began to face serious problems. After taking over Emeka's spare parts shop, he enjoyed several years of fake success. He used Emeka's reputation to grow the business at first, but Damien lacked the discipline and honesty his late brother had. He cut corners, overcharged customers, and refused to pay suppliers. Slowly, the business began to lose clients. People started whispering that his goods were fake. Rumors spread that he used charms to attract buyers. Trust vanished. At home, his children became spoilt and wild. With the money flowing, he gave them everything they asked for: phones, clothes, cars, freedom. But without proper guidance, they lost control. His eldest son began drinking heavily and was arrested twice for fighting. His second daughter dropped out of school and ran away with a married man. His youngest child, once innocent and cheerful, was suspended from school for stealing from a teacher's handbag. Chief Damien tried to control them, but it was too late. He had focused so much on wealth and reputation that he forgot how to raise his family. His wife, once proud and loud, grew bitter and angry. Their home, once filled with laughter, now echoed with shouting and blame. As the business collapsed, the loans Damien had collected began to haunt him. Creditors knocked on his gate at night. His phone never stopped ringing. His shop was locked several times by angry suppliers. He borrowed more to pay old debts, but the hole only got deeper. In desperation, he started selling properties. First, the family land in the village. Then the small apartment he had built on the outskirts of town. Finally, he tried to sell the shop itself, but no one wanted to buy a failing business with a tainted name. And still, he lied to the villagers. He told them Martha had disappeared into shame. He told them Ibuka had dropped out of school and become a street hawker. He said their suffering was proof that the gods had punished her for trying to poison Emika. But inside, he was terrified. He had heard whispers that the boy was doing well, that he had won prizes, that he spoke in churches, that a powerful man had sponsored him, and that his mother was still alive. Damien feared the truth. He feared that the son of the woman he had disgraced would one day return, not as a beggar, but as a giant. As Martha sat quietly one evening, leaning against the wall of their room with a bowl of hot water on her lap, she looked at Ibuka. He was reading again, his legs crossed on the mat, his lips moving softly as he memorized a science chapter. She felt peace. She felt purpose. The pain in her chest was still there, but so was hope. Hope that her son was now stepping into something bigger. Hope that the years of humiliation, hunger, and hard labor had not been wasted. Hope that the tears she cried into her pillow each night had not gone unseen. Martha knew the storm wasn't over, but the clouds were finally breaking, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice told her, the rain had not washed her away. It had watered the seed she was raising. Ibuka's new school was nothing like the one he left behind. It was big and beautiful, with tall white buildings, wide fields, shiny tiled floors, and long rows of flowering trees. The students wore neat uniforms, carried laptops in their bags, and spoke with confidence. Some arrived in flashy cars, dropped off by drivers who held their umbrellas. The school was filled with the children of businessmen, politicians, and professionals. Ibuka, however, walked through the gate each morning with his bag hanging from one shoulder, his shoes patched but clean. His uniform, though ironed with care, had been worn too many times. He carried an old notebook and a pen that sometimes leaked, and yet he walked with purpose. The first week was not easy. Students stared at him as if he didn't belong. They asked each other where he came from. Some whispered insults when he passed. Others laughed at his accent, his shoes, or the way he bowed when greeting teachers. But Ibuka ignored them. He knew who he was. He knew why he was there. In class, he focused on his books. His eyes followed the board like a hawk. He sat in the front row, answered questions others couldn't, and submitted his assignments early. Teachers quickly noticed him. One even asked if he had studied the topics before arriving, but he hadn't. He simply read harder than anyone else. While others slept, he studied under candlelight. While others played games, he solved math puzzles. And while some students were carried by wealth, Ibuka was lifted by determination. At break time, he usually sat alone. He ate quietly, sometimes only biscuits and water. Some boys joked that he was the scholarship boy, the one who came with village dust. They made fun of his simple clothes, calling them thrift shop fashion. But Ibuka didn't respond. He simply smiled and returned to class. One afternoon, a notice was posted on the school board. It announced a national mathematics competition open to all students in the country. It was sponsored by a global education group and aimed to find young talents from Africa. Students from top schools in Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, and beyond had already registered. Ebuka saw the flyer and knew instantly that he had to try. The school headmaster encouraged him. Mr. Ibe, who still kept in touch, sent him old past questions and practice tests. Martha, though still recovering from her health battles, fasted and prayed the night before his exam. She watched him leave that morning with pride in her heart and tears in her eyes. The competition was held at a university campus filled with hundreds of brilliant students. The hall was packed. Each participant was given a paper with 20 questions and strict instructions. They had 90 minutes to complete it. Ebuka sat at the far end, surrounded by noise, whispers, and tension. He closed his eyes for a second and thought of his mother. Then he picked up his pen and began to write. When the results were released, Ebuka's name was at the very top. He had scored the highest mark in the country. Newspapers carried the headline, "Poor boy from Aba wins National Math Genius Award." His photo was published alongside his school name. He was dressed simply, with a shy smile on his face and a certificate in his hand. The story spread fast. Journalists wanted to interview him. Radio stations talked about him. Education foundations began asking questions about the boy who came from nothing but carried so much brilliance. One popular online article read, "From firewood to figures, meet the boy genius who beat Nigeria's brightest." In a small corner of Umuahia, that very newspaper found its way to the hands of Chief Damien. He read the headline once, then again, his hands shaking. His eyes widened as he saw the name, Ebuka Chiemeka, his brother's son. The boy he said didn't exist. The same boy he and Auntie Rose had sworn was cursed. Damien sat still, the paper trembling between his fingers. He remembered everything, how they chased Martha out, how they burned her mattress, how they told the village she stole money and ran. He had spent years burying the truth under lies. Now, the boy he wanted to erase was becoming a national star. Damien called Auntie Rose immediately. She came rushing to his house, angry that he disturbed her during her siesta. But the moment she saw the newspaper, she froze. Her mouth hung open. For the first time in years, she had no insult to throw. She simply sat down slowly and stared at the photo.